a data science and policy blog. Don't everyone click at once now. At first mention, it may not exactly seem like a break the internet contender, but what it lacks in sizzle, it more than makes up for with buzzworthy content that will serve you much better than the latest reality star exploit. Quant New York utilizes as much open data as New York City can pump out, while advocating for more access to information it uses to help policymakers and everyday citizens navigate this hometown of ours. Dr. Ben Wellington crunches the numbers and shares the info, and we're happy to welcome him back to BK Live.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Well, we're happy to have you. So what have you been working on since we saw you last?
Lots of interesting things. You know, as was mentioned, the more data that gets out there, the more insights come. I guess maybe the most significant was sort of a recent finding where I realized I'd gotten a parking ticket for parking in front of a pedestrian ramp.
Yeah.
And it turns out it's legal to park there. So after I got a few of these and I disputed them, I realized it can't be just me. And so instead of just kind of disputing them one-off, I went on the open data portal, downloaded all the parking tickets given in the last 3 years, and isolated the parking spots that got the most of these tickets, and found out that these spots have been ticketed legally by the NYPD for as long as the data was there, to the tune of about $2 to $3 million a year given to legally parked cars.
Really?
Yeah.
Now, I remember the last time you were here, you talked about this spot. Was it on the Lower East Side?
A single spot, with a fire hydrant.
Just like one single spot.
Yeah, so I'm getting bigger now.
The most expensive real estate in New York.
Yeah, those were fire hydrants that were generating more than minimum wage just being fire hydrants. They were just sitting there making $55,000 a year because there was a misleading parking spot painted that wasn't legal.
Yeah.
So that was a single spot. This now is more broad, affecting kind of all 5 boroughs and thousands of drivers.
We actually have a map that shows sort of the hot spots. There was here, and there was one on Caton that wasn't far from my place.
Okay. Yeah, I thought of you when I saw that address.
Come over, people. But we have a photo of it actually, and it shows you these like 2 ramps that are, these are the sort of mislabeled sort of things, right?
It's strange, right? The question is, should it be legal to park there? And that was in 2009. The Department of Transportation said, you know, these are unsafe pedestrian ramps because there's no stop signs.
It's in the middle of the street.
Right. Yeah. And so that maybe I agree with, but then, so let's put a car in front of it to make it more safe.
Yeah.
That I have no opinion on.
It'll keep your wheelchair from careening off the sidewalk.
Isn't the idea that the wheelchair should make it on?
It is the law, and so we want a police that sort of follows. And to the NYPD's credit, when I pointed it out, within 3 weeks they issued orders to retrain their officers, said, yeah, we made a mistake. I was blown away. I mean, it's never occurred to me that a state agency.
Refunds.
Apparently, they've set up a form.
Yeah.
The Department of Finance has told people go to this website. I don't know how they're going to do it because they have to look at each individual ticket. They become judges. It seems crazy to give refunds, but it's happening. And so, I mean, it was amazing to see a government agency respond to public data and actually make a change quite quickly. I mean, the open data community across the world kind of reached out and was like, wow, that's how open data is supposed to work. And so it was really cool.
Yeah, you must not always get that kind of response.
Immediate gratification. So the question becomes, if you can look at that and synthesize it, being an outsider, why can't the people who are doing it and putting it out correct their wrongs before showing their butt to everybody?
I mean, it's a great question. You know, our government agencies are, you know, they have a lot of work to do. Like run a city, run a country. And so, you know, what I advocate for is the release of this public data and sort of outsourcing innovation, right? If you can get data out in the hands of people who care, then maybe government can learn from those people and actually implement change. And so I've had small things like I got the MTA to add a 4th button to every vending machine that gives you a round balance on your Metro card, right? There's a $10, $20, $40 button. Yeah. You'll notice a new button, $27.25. Yeah. That was because of mathematical proof I did that showed you couldn't get a 0 balance riding the subway. And so they added a new button. A little thing, I've gotten the Taxi Limousine Commission to reprogram cabs in New York because the tipping algorithms were kind of messed up. And so small wins so far, but I see a world where people can give back, help crime, fire, all these things. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
News you can use.
I love this. Yeah. So this is all on the Quant New York blog?
It's a little blog. It's actually a side project. I work in the financial industry. Yeah. And that's where actually the word quant comes from. Some people refer to people who do analysis in finance as quants. And so this was my sort of side project, or my wife is an urban planner. and so she got me
Perfect.
open
Yeah.
data plus urban planning wife plus data science guy.
I weep for your children.
Yeah, I have a 9-month-old, so that's my blog posts have gone from weekly to monthly once he was born.
So
But
you
I'm
talk
trying.
about the work in the finance industry, but you also have been teaching over at Pratt as
yeah.
well. So I remember, confession here, my freshman year, I took statistics for about a week and a half.
Everyone makes that face.
And I got the hell out of that class
I
a
hear
week
ya.
and a half later. But maybe if I had a professor who had real world applications. So how do you introduce this to your students and give them these real life challenges? And
Right.
what difference does it make?
So instead of learning from a textbook where you have a made-up problem, like Bill and Jane bought some apples,
Right.
and how many apples are we sampling? And it's like, no one cares, right? So the idea was to take public data and make a course built around real data about New York. And actually, this is what led to the blog. I had to make interesting homework assignments, and I wanted the students to have cool findings, and so I started to find cool things. And then I was like, well, maybe more than my students would be interested in this. And I started putting them on the blog, and it kind of grew. But it turns out that instead of really hating statistics, they kind of only minorly dislike statistics. So things are going way better.
excellent.
No, actually, they enjoy it, to be honest. Things have turned around and I think it's a good model for teaching statistics in an applied manner in a world where we don't have to make up data. Why are we making up data when we have all this data right at our fingertips? It's nuts. And so it's been really fun at Pratt to work with students and see them kind of light up when they have no math background. They also I hated statistics in high school. I mean, I didn't do well. But once you start applying it, it becomes fun, and oh wow, I can do this and that. So that's really cool.
What are some of the cooler things they found, and do they end up contributing to the blog ever?
I've had some sort of inspirational moments. One actually analyzed the number of unique fruits and vegetables available at farmers markets by month. And so it turned out that I think September was prime farmers market. If you graph, the number of unique things, it actually peaks in September. And so that made its way into a blog post, but it was a student's idea and work. And so
I love it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have guessed that. But I mean, I guess it makes sense.
Well,
Harvest time.
still going down the
Pre-post.
path of news you can use, you get some great statistics on crime and essentially the 3 o'clock crime wave that happens in New York City.
Right. This is interesting. So there's been a long push for New York to release crime data. And what we usually get are these aggregate numbers, meaning how many crimes in this month, this many things happen in this precinct, and that's it. On what block do they happen? At what time do they happen? We've never known until maybe a few months ago when the NYPD released the raw data. It's called incident level data because it's each individual crime. You don't get to know who, but it's a lot of data. And so you can start to look at the actual time, the precinct, all this information. So I looked at the time of day of certain types of things, and what you see is there's a robbery.
Major felonies by the hour.
Right. And so there's the robbery line, which is sort of purple on this chart towards the bottom. You see it kind of go up and peak around 3 to 4 p.m. It's sort of the I don't know what that color is, but lavender, we'll call it. That spike corresponds with school getting out. And so remember, these are not burglaries, these are not people breaking into a home. These are robberies, meaning a confrontation with force. And so
your iPhones, grabby
and so I isolated it for where weeks where students were on vacation versus weeks where students weren't on vacation. There was no spike when students were on vacation. Only during school days did we see the spike. Now, do we know whether it's the students who are victims or I mean, people have different opinions. Unfortunately, New York hasn't put out that data. And they also only have released major felony data, which is kind of disappointing. Most cities have gone ahead and released more minor crimes. But there's a lot of politics behind this. As we start to look at things, there's a lot of question about broken, the broken windows. And so it's unclear why New York hasn't yet released this data when most other large cities have. And I'm excited to see sort of the broader swath. But today, we got 10 years of major felony data, which is a great step forward compared to where we were a year ago.
So is that the sort of final frontier of open data? Are the police least forthcoming, or is there like a department, whether it's buildings or police or school lunch? Anything.
You know who's least forthcoming is
so tight.
Those who don't have a legislative, who aren't being legislated to release data are least forthcoming. So an example would be the New York City Housing Authority. Because they're not a city agency, they're not covered under the open data laws. And so we've seen so little data from it. It's a black hole. And it's sad because so much of our city resides there. And the data,
help out so much.
wouldn't that be great if the community could start to analyze, figure out vacancy rates and stuff? But or something like the Economic Development Corporation, once again, not a city agency.
Right.
They run the competition every year, which is a big apps competition working with open data, but don't really release much data themselves.
Yeah.
Why? Because they're not maybe legislated that they have to, and so that's disappointing to see. Police, have been slow, but things are all moving in a great direction. Every month, you hear of a new data set, and I think the major issue today is that the data sets are released, but no one owns them, and so they could be noisy, messy. And who do you call and say, hey, it's broken? Nobody today in New York. So that's probably the biggest issue today in New York City data.
Any big myths out there that you feel like have been dispelled in your work for you or for others?
I would say there's something that people had observed. I would say the opposite. There's something that people had observed that I kind of verified.
Turned out to be not true.
Yeah, it turned out to be true, which was interesting.
Okay.
Which we kind of all knew. You know how you can't get a cab at like 4 to 5 p.m.?
I ride a bike.
Yeah, okay. I ride a bike to work every day too. But if you live in New York, you see the off-duty sign enough, and you see.
Yeah.
It turns out that if you look at the dollars per minute that the entire cab fleet makes, it just drops between 4 and 6 p.m. And it turns out the reason is because there's a shift change then.
Oh.
But why is everyone changing at the same time?
At the same time.
Yeah.
Isn't that weird?
New York
That is
City.
weird.
The math shows
Maybe they were
that it's
praying or
the
something.
equilibrium point where the previous 12 hours makes the same amount of money as the next 12 hours. And because cabs are split in two, that's the only time of day where it's fair for us to split it. And because it's fair for us, even though we'll make less money, it's fair.
Yeah.
So today, everyone's switching at the same time, leading to this thing. How do you fix it? You rent the cabs out for different amounts depending on
Like
the
peak
demand.
time?
Yeah.
Like
But we
surge
can't
pricing.
because New York City has legislated the amount you can rent a cab out for. So the fleets can't actually solve this problem, and instead they threw a rush hour surcharge, which didn't really help very much, but we're all paying it anyway.
Right.
We all pay this rush hour surcharge trying to fix this problem, but the data shows it's nowhere near fixed, but we all keep paying a rush hour fee. So.
Does that change at all with companies like Uber or Lyft, where people are using their own cars and making their own hours?
Surge pricing too.
Yeah, I mean,
That's the thing.
Uber and Lyft are interesting because the data is harder to get to.
Right.
It's not a government agency.
It's a private
So
thing.
sometimes they have to give data to the government for some regulatory agreement, and then you can kind of file a Freedom of Information Act and get it. And so some data has been analyzed, but we don't know a ton about them because their data
They're
is
falling
private.
into that same group.
So Ben, when there is someone private to get out of the public realm, like would an Uber call you up, or even like a JetBlue? We were talking about how there's these long lines at the terminals now in the TSA. How much does that play into people who are quants? Do they ever work for private agencies like that?
Yeah, I mean, and more broadly, I guess the big term these days is data scientists, is what everyone is using. So certainly, most industries now are employing people to look through this thing. I happen to only work outside of my day job. I only work on public data because I believe that I want results to be replicable. And so if you're doing something for a government agency with a university and the data's private, nobody can reproduce those results. So like science says reproducible, but here we are with these back channel, let me get you this data, put out this. So I'm seeing a lot of that, and so I've actually turned down a lot of work because the data was not public. And I think that that's an important aspect to doing this sort of work because we make mistakes, right? I'll make mistakes. And if the data is public, someone will catch my mistake. If it's not, no one will ever know, and that's not really good for the health of the industry, right? So.
Yeah.
So I had another question.
Yeah.
Because every time he's here, it's like time to ask all this stuff about the city.
Get it out there.
No, because I wondered what you've been most surprised about just over the course of doing these things, whether it was like your ticket led you down this rabbit hole or that other one that was making more than minimum wage. Like, what's been a surprising thing for you?
I would say the most surprising was what I learned about taxi tipping, and so this was kind of interesting. You get in a cab and you're offered, once again, you never take cab, but if you did, in theory.
Yeah, I rarely do.
I know, but you have been in one in your life.
Yes.
Totally.
All right, so the one time you're in a cab, there was a little thing and it said, do you want to tip 20, 25, or 30%?
Right.
So you ever think about tip on what? What are you tipping on? Is it on the fare, the surcharge, the taxes, the tolls? Are you tipping on going through? It turned out it depended on the manufacturer of the computer in the back of the cab. Half the fleet was programmed to tip on top of tolls and taxes, and the other half wasn't.
Not even the ride.
Right?
Really?
No, and the ride, sorry.
On top of.
Well, I mean, because the ride
including
is
the ride.
one thing.
It's tipping on top of the ride and tolls
so it's
and
like
taxes.
The ride was 10
so there's
and all
Creative
that
Mobile
stuff.
Technologies and there's Verifone, and they had two different programs. And so half the drivers in the fleet were making $350 more a year because the software in the cab, because people hit 20% and they were tipping on tolls.
And now it's changed? Or
and so I wrote about this.
Okay.
And I got a great quote from the Taxi and Limousine Commission that said, we're aware of his study and we're giving it a thorough read. and that was it. So, but 2 weeks later, they reprogrammed half the cabs in New York, and today we all tip on top of tolls and taxes.
Really?
No, they went the other way.
It does. I know. But at least it's equitable.
Thanks for that.
I know. But at least it's equitable. At least you don't have, and if we want to have a spirited debate about whether we should be tipping on top of tolls, which is kind of interesting to tip on an $8 toll, 20%,
Right.
Well, I don't want to have that debate, but at least at least it's all in line, and it's a highly regulated industry, and it was kind of strange where the color's regulated, but the tipping wasn't. Right.
Yeah.
And so I'm glad that it was fixed, although it went in a different way than I might have expected.
David Yaskey still the TLC commissioner?
No, has been, that was under the last administration.
All right, moving on.
Oh my goodness, Ben. Well, I think we're actually almost out of time. Tell us where to find you. Tell us about iQuant New York.
Yeah, iQuant New York. It's iQuant.NYC. It's a blog that I post on. Like I said, less often now because I have a young one, but maybe scaling up. Also working on a book with Riverhead, which is part of Penguin. So look for that kind of next year.
You'll have to come back.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's a mailing list there, and that's lots of fun. Some of it's quirky, by the way. This was all kind of meaningful. I also found the person who lived farthest from a Starbucks in Manhattan. Like that actual person. Yeah, and things like that.
What borough?
It was only looking at Manhattan, and there was someone up in Inwood.
All right.
And I wanted to go ring their doorbell.
I
wanted to ring their doorbell. Excuse me, did you know you live farthest? But I thought that might not go well in New York. I don't know.
Awesome.
I would have loved it.
Yeah.
I'm from Inwood.
Like, let's take a walk.
So like some of it's fun, some of it's policy and wonky, and some of it's just kind of quirky. Like the longest walk to a subway was on the Upper East Side, and things like that have to do with everyday life.
Yes, all the way east.
Or like
Second Avenue's going to cure you. All right, well, iQuant NY. Thank you so much for being here.
It's awesome being here. Thank you.
Always fun.